Okay, this is the Board of County Commissioners Board Work Session. It is Wednesday, June 21st, 2023. It is 10:41 a.m. We're starting a little bit later than what we had scheduled. I apologize about that. We're at 3000 Pacific Avenue Southeast, room 110 for public virtual attendance. You may follow along on the Thurston County YouTube channel. I'm Carolina Mejia. I'm the chair of the board. To my right is Vice Chair Ty Menser. To my left is Commissioner Gary Edwards. And today we're going to be discussing the 2023 Conservation Features Briefing. And
right to Andrew.
I'll take it real quick here. So Joshua Cummings, Director of Community Planning and Economic Development. Andy's going to provide an overview of conservation features and a discussion of an application that was received within the timeline, the deadlines for review. And then
something went wrong. Please try again.
Should I start over? Something went wrong. Please try again. So overview of conservation features is a program. Secondly, the application that was received in a timely manner that the Conservation Features Ranking Committee had a chance to review. And third, recently we had an email request for another application. So an option for the board to consider a second round to allow for transparency in the community and a decision or a discussion on that third application. So in the interest of time, I'll take it away with one last statement saying this is one of those great opportunities that the board has to impact our community in terms of providing funds for great programs in terms of conservation. So this is a positive discussion. Go for it, Andrew.
All right, good morning, commissioners. Andrew DeFova, Senior Planner with Community Planning. I'll go ahead and jump right in. It's always a lag, hang on.
It's up.
There we go. Okay, so Conservation Features is a program authorized by the state legislature to support the protection of a variety of lands, including wildlife habitat, forest lands, agriculture, and properties with historic and recreational attributes. The county has been collecting a property tax levy to fund acquisitions since about 1990, to fund acquisitions or conservation easements on property. The rate paid by taxpayers in 2023 is about 3 cents per $1,000 assessed value. And these funds are managed by the Board of County Commissioners, who typically allocates about $500,000 a year for new projects. The program operates like an annual grant program. Each year the applications are due before March 1st, and they must be sponsored by an eligible entity as authorized by RCW 8434. Most of the time this is a land trust, but it can also be city governments, or it can be the county directly spending money on acquiring property. There's a ranking committee that reviews applications and make recommendations to the board. It's made up of county advisory board members and agency, technical agency experts. So just to run down the committee representation, you've got representatives from the Agricultural Advisory Committee, Storm and Surface Water Advisory Board, Historic Commission. We get parks representation from surrounding jurisdictions. And then switching over to agencies, the Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation, Thurston Conservation District, and wildlife agencies such as Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife or U.S. Fish and Wildlife are represented on that ranking committee. Ultimately, the board makes funding decisions based on the recommendations provided or in part informed by those recommendations. So some quick stats for you. Since 1990 and the program's inception, there have been about 51 projects that have been completed, resulting in approximately 5,700 acres conserved and representing about $20.4 million in funds outlaid. We also have one project in the pipeline that has not yet been completed. It was awarded funding last year, and that is a 228-acre conservation easement with a fund or award from the board of $750,000. So these are the ranking criteria that are established by the board and that are used by the ranking committee to review and score applications and make recommendations. The ranking committee looks at how the projects fit into the overall program and its objectives and goals. They consider how time sensitive the project is, so how likely is it that the land would sell or see additional development if it was not protected. And they look at specific natural attributes of the property. So is it habitat for endangered or threatened species? Does it present salmon restoration potential? Does it contain historic cultural resources, or is it working agroforestry land, things of that nature? And they consider how likely the project is to succeed given all the information that they have, as well as how much match is offered by the project applicants. Match is not a requirement of the program, but potentially an application scores more points if they can demonstrate that they've got match to provide. And then similarly with public access, it's not something that is required by the program, but points are available if a property has some component of public access. So as a reminder, the official funding cycle is January 1st to February 28th each year. This year, we received one application during that time, which is the Powell Creek Protection Project. And it's pictured on this map with a red asterisk in the southeastern portion of the county. So here are some details about the project. This is a proposed acquisition of 32.5 acres. The property is located about 10 miles southeast of Yelm in the vicinity of Clear Lake. The funding request is $350,000 total. It's the formal funding request. The property features about 1,200 linear feet of Powell Creek, which supports federally listed salmon. Also 17 acres of wetlands and 15 acres of forested uplands. Property provides spawning and rearing habitat for several salmonid species, and it also adjoins Nisqually Land Trust's already protected 523-acre Powell Creek protected area. And Nisqually Land Trust is the project sponsor, if I didn't mention that at the top. So here are some images, clockwise from the top right. This is a vicinity map that shows the project area in its context in the Nisqually Valley. The bottom right is an aerial image of the site and its immediate surroundings, and the bottom left shows the property adjacent to area currently protected by Nisqually Land Trust.
So the yellow is the Powell Creek currently protected?
Correct.
And the red/orange would add to that?
Yes, that's correct. So
Great.
the red/orange that I'm circling here is the property in question. And as you can see, it's adjacent to a larger area that is bounded by yellow. So here are some additional photos of the property itself that were provided in the application and presentation. Just give you a moment to look at those.
Soak it in.
Soak it in, yeah, sure. Okay, so here's a summary of the results from the ranking committee. This was scored by the ranking committee using that criteria that we covered a moment ago and received an average score of 39.25 out of 55 possible points. This is where we would juxtapose that with all the other applications had we gotten several in that window. But there was just the one at that time. So the ranking committee also wanted to pass on some insights to the board along with their scoring. One thing that they mentioned was to consider providing additional funds beyond the requested amount if they are available. They noted that the property adds to the lands already protected by Nisqually Land Trust and would complete protection of the entire wetland system associated with Powell Creek. They noted that Nisqually Land Trust has demonstrated a track record of conservation success, and also that they appreciate their partnering with the Nisqually tribe, and suggested that the acquisition recognize that the area is within the tribe's homeland. The committee noted that the lower Nisqually River is tributary poor, that there's really only a few big tributaries on the lower Nisqually, and this property contains one of those. And they also wanted to highlight that there is a timing element to this project. So the land is currently in a living trust, and there's a limited window to acquire it. Nisqually Land Trust has the first opportunity to purchase, but if it will be listed for sale, conservation funding is not secured. So there are some options for the board to consider on this project. The first option would be to fund the Powell Creek acquisition at the original $350,000 request, and this was the preferred option of the ranking committee at the time that they met. A second option would be to provide a different amount of funding to this project. So since the ranking committee made its recommendations, we received information from Nisqually Land Trust that the circumstances have changed on this project and the new property assessments went out this year. And so the landowner is still willing to sell at the assessed value, but that assessed value has now increased. And so the current assessment is $391,000. And so the request from Nisqually Land Trust is to consider an additional amount of that $350,000. And then the third option would be to not fund the project, the null option. So if the funding is awarded, staff will circulate a letter for board signature. So those are the options for this project. And before I turn that over for discussion, we also wanted to highlight one more piece of the puzzle here, and that's the opportunity potentially for the board to consider a second round of applications this year. So in the time since the ranking committee issued its recommendations, the county was approached by another conservation, or approached and informed about another conservation opportunity. So the Creekside Conservancy has approached the county about the possibility of submitting an application for a 6.5 acre parcel down in the Tenino area. The property is adjacent to land that's already owned and protected by Creekside Conservancy. And my understanding is that the landowners of the property have communicated that they have an interest in selling the property or otherwise putting cattle on the property. And so Creekside Conservancy is working on options that might allow them to purchase that property for them. And so they're essentially requesting consideration by the board. So in response to this request, staff have brought back an option for the board to consider here, which would be to open a second application window for additional applications for the 2023 cycle.
Do we know approximately how much they're going to be asking for?
That I am not sure of. We might have a representative here. who might-
Amy, do you mind coming up?
No, not at all. You want me to sit at the table?
Yeah,
Excuse me.
and Amy Richardson is a board member from the Creekside Conservancy, and who reached out to me initially, so.
Yeah, so we are kind of aiming for around 140,000. That will include like that's what we have written the grant for surfboard. And that includes like a yellow book appraisal and things of that nature, all the things that are included in a grant. The land value, we're kind of estimating around 70. So our total ask would include what we need to make the grant successful for the appraisal and things like that. So we're estimating about 140.
And so staff's perspective is you've got one application that is timely. You have another that's come in, but in terms of making sure that there's transparency in the decision-making process, instead of just deeming, let's go for that second one, to open up the round of applications again. So if there's other applications in the community that would like to compete for these dollars, that it's a full and transparent process. And so that's staff's recommendation to the board. If you want to consider a second one, is to open up the process again.
And then the last thing that I really have is just framing for the board is that essentially there are two decision points for the board before them today. One is a funding decision on a pending application, and then the second is an option to open a window for a second round of applications. And so with that, I will return to option one on the slide and
Let
see
me
if there are
open
any
it up
questions.
for questions, and then I'll get to the decision point. Commissioner Edwards.
How
questions?
many acres is Powell Creek?
Powell Creek is 32.5 acres.
And is that public access?
I do not believe so.
We have
We've got a representative here in the room that might know the answer to that question. Let's see.
Thank you, Commissioners. Joe Kane, I'm a Special Projects Consultant to the Nisqually Land Trust and retired Executive Director of the Nisqually Land Trust. And I do the acquisitions now for Nisqually Land Trust. In this project, the question was about public access to the project. It'll have the kind of public access that the rest of the Powell Creek project has. That's probably our leading property for volunteer participation and restoration. This property will have a full restoration. We'll bring, in addition to the Conservation Futures funding, we'll bring about $175,000 for restoration of the property, which will include a lot of tree planting, planting of native vegetation, as well as demolition. There's an old cabin on the site and a bad septic system perched right on the wetland. We'll bring salmon recovery money to take care of all of that, as well as all the expenses outside of the actual acquisition. The funds we're asking for are strictly to purchase the property. And as Andrew mentioned, we had an agreement with the landowner to sell at assessed value. New assessment showed up 2 weeks ago, and the property went from $350 to $391. So we're requesting an increase there. That will still be below appraised value. The landowner will still be contributing substantially to the property as well, with a donation of, will be in the range of $65,000.
Did that value go up because of timber?
No, it just went up because land went up. My property went up too. No, it's not because of the timber value. The timber that's on there, it's not a big portion of the property in terms of merchantable timber.
And that public access, I'm still not clear on that. So, I mean, is the public allowed to go down and walk on the property?
Our properties, and this one will fit into this category as I understand it now. I mean, if something, emerges that it's a danger to the public to be on there unsupervised or something, we would, limit the public access. But we have unimproved public access. Folks are free to go, especially the Powell Creek area. They're free to go to the area and walk their dogs, things like that. We won't build trails on it. We'll do, at certain points, we'll do tours and site visits, and then we'll have our volunteer program, which we do every Wednesday. We have a volunteer work parties, and folks will have access to come out on the property that way.
Questions, Commissioner Mensah?
Yeah, my questions are about the Creekside Conservancy. So, first of all, they're trying to get a surfboard grant. I saw that in the documentation. Is that like is it either or are they working together somehow? They get our thing, they'll pull their surfboard application because you've got the money you need? Or?
I would defer to Amy simply because all that information would likely be in an application, which we have not
We have not submitted an application.
gotten yet. So I've got
Right.
pieces, but I think Amy might be better equipped to answer that question at this time.
Yeah, so we missed the deadline for the conservation futures grant. We believe it's a better fit. The surfboard grant is, we are not likely to get funded through that. I have submitted an ecology grant for match as well. So I've got a few things lined up for potential match. We just thought we would try and see if there's a possibility to apply for conservation futures because we have good success. We've had success in the past with through the Conservancy with other grants with conservation futures. Under Hairnet Environmental Foundation also, if Creekside Conservancy is not a familiar name, we're the same entity. And it matches the situation that we have with this particular property. We kind of had a last minute becoming aware of the owner wanting to sell or potentially put cattle on, and we're trying to develop the whole Cozy Valley area into the long-term planning is for a wetland complex.
So if I remember correctly, part of the Creekside Conservancy in this area is connected to projects or suite of projects in the Chehalis Stream Flow Restoration Act watershed plan. Is that ringing any bells for anyone? I just curious how this would fit into that.
Well, so I'm a volunteer also, so I don't know all of like the ins and outs, but the most significant part of this is that we are in the Cozy Valley area, and the land that we already own and this acreage that we're trying to get acquired is in the headwaters of Scatter Creek. And so kind of our overall philosophy and directive of this is to, by protecting the headwaters of Scatter Creek, we are influencing the quality and quantity of water that is entering into the Chehalis, because Scatter Creek goes directly into the Chehalis. So with the health of Scatter Creek, we are influencing the Chehalis Basin as well.
Yeah, I'm just throwing it out for my seatmates' benefit because I serve on the Chehalis. I mean, this conservation futures criteria are different, but I think
Right.
there's a corollary
There's
water
some, yeah.
quantity benefit, because I think that whole effort to preserve that corridor is included. And I know we've sponsored projects from the Chehalis Basin Partnership.
And one of the other things that's pretty critical about the Scatter Creek watershed is that it is the source of water for the city of Tenino. And so the overall project goal too, to develop this wetland complex, in the future planning phases is to help kind of, create a situation where we're holding water, slowing it down a little bit, allowing the aquifer to recharge better, running through the city and keeping water in the streams where it belongs.
I think my last question is probably for Andy, but it's, so if the land is 70,000 and their request is for 140, and it sounded like some of that is administration or something, are we allowed to fund something like that?
Yes, so due diligence costs are eligible costs under conservation futures, and that can include property surveys, appraisals, that can include properly documented staff time from these agencies working on these. And there are a variety of things outside the purchase price that can be awarded in conservation futures.
Okay, those are my questions.
Okay.
I think I know.
Just in terms of process, so the board sets aside $500,000 a year for these grants. If you've got the 391 from the one that is submitted currently, that brings you down to 109,000 available. And that's a $31,000 gap to the 140 that's being requested. So you don't want to be pre-decisional. Obviously, you want to go, our recommendation is to go through a process, but the board has the latitude to decide on how much is provided through conservation futures. Just keeping those numbers in mind might be helpful as you make your decisions.
Thank you. I was doing the math in my calculator because I
But-
wanted to make
But
sure.
if I mean, in terms of
what
the
gap-
process, I think going back to what Josh stated, be transparent. You know, although that we receive a late application, there may be other late applications that may be you receiving as well. And I think you need to provide that opportunity to others, perhaps submit an application as well. So
Which, yeah. Go to Robin. How much funding do we have in conservation futures?
We're projecting an ending fund balance of approximately $7.5 million. And do recall that not only have you allocated 500,000 to this, but this is the fund that is supporting
HCP.
land purchase for the HCP. So you've allocated 500,000 a year for that in accordance with the plan that was approved by US Fish. But so far we've spent more money on those acquisitions, so it's $7 million.
So there is capacity for the
There's a
board to
lot of
consider.
capacity in this fund.
So some of the feedback I've heard, right, I think is as conservation futures, it's, I think, I don't know, it was with the Boston Harvard group. I was like, who was I talking to? And we were talking about conservation futures and how, as we've gone through, right, it's usually like one application that rolls and just how do we get more engagement on that? And knowing that there's only like a small availability of funding and so for me, if there is capacity, you know, I would like to do like another round of funding and maybe increasing that from, you know, Lynn and I maybe to like 250 or 300, just for a second round of applications to come through.
Maybe if the board decides to go with a second round of applications, that would be our recommendation. Without sending yourself as to what additional money will be, just receive applications, get that information before you, and evaluate those applications, and then you may determine what the level of funding you may consider on those applications.
Can we just go ahead and fund the Nisqually project though?
Yeah, you do
Yeah.
have the option, absolutely,
Wait on
yeah.
that if
Yeah.
we don't need to.
So with the
Just,
go ahead.
no, you
Oh.
go ahead.
Oh, no,
But I
I
wanna,
was-
I've got a question when,
Okay, I was just gonna go with the Powell Creek acquisition, right? Because we have options in front of us. And we've heard that, you know, there's the 350, but there's been a new assessment, so the new request would be up to 391, which would be option 2, or there's also option 3. So just kind of wanted to go back to that decision point, but go ahead, Commissioner Edwards.
do we get any benefit towards, HCP benefit, maybe towards a dog or?
I don't think so for either of these.
Anything like that? How about the Tenino, maybe for the gopher, for the frog?
It's outside of those areas. Both of these projects are outside of the habitat conservation
And
plans.
what's the flow in the Scatter Creek? What is it? Does it flow 4 months out of the year, 6 months out of the year? What is it?
Have to look into that and bring you more information. I do believe it's a shoreline stream, so it must have an average annual flow of at least 20 cubic feet per second along at least some of its length. But I don't know. It does seem to dry up in the summer.
Pardon?
It does seem to dry up in the summer.
Oh, yeah, every summer that I'm aware of, it's dried up, but I don't know exactly where.
We
And
can bring you
how,
information on that.
how it fits within this property. And if there is any benefit, that's, I think the frog, there's no benefit there. If we, try to do an infiltration project, it sounds like they're gonna try to charge the aquifer. That means hold water back.
So I think the application, they could certainly focus on if there are any benefits to any listed species, but at this time in the analysis we've done so far, it appears to be outside of that habitat screen. But
So we have
more
a-
analysis to come.
We have a map that says where those areas are, and the map doesn't have these areas in the frog areas.
No bird, no frog, no anything, huh?
Okay, so going back to the first decision point, which is to fund Powell Creek acquisition at 350. Option 2, to provide a different amount of funding to the project, which is 391, or 3, do not fund project. Commissioner Edwards?
Well, I wanna fund the project.
Okay, at what level?
Well, I kinda wanted to hear a little more from Joe about kind of what the plan is. I mean, we've got the money, right? But are we, if we always do this, do we set precedent, you raised it 50,000 for this one, can we raise it 100 for the next one? We wanna keep going on this
Yeah.
type of thing.
So,
I'm just curious, I wanna buy the project, but when we talk about opening up, we got a time element involved or something. So that's kind of what I'm looking for now, we got a time element
Well,
involved.
let me get Commissioner Mentzer's decision
Oh, okay.
points, and then, because he has to go, and then we'll go back, and then
Oh.
John can come in.
Okay, I didn't know
Answer.
that.
I have a speaking engagement, I gotta
Oh.
be downtown. I vote to fund the 391 and to open another funding round with no specific dollar amount set.
Okay, thank
Thank
you. Okay, so going back to your question.
Okay, I'll go along with Commissioner Menzer. That's pretty.
Well,
I
I
didn't know.
do you not want your?
No, because I want to fund it.
Okay,
And if we've got the board leaning that way, I'm good with it. I just want to make sure that we don't shoot ourselves in the foot. I defer to my attorney, seatmate
okay,
there. I'm good with it.
okay, so you're 391.
Yep.
So you have 3 thumbs on the 391. And then the second option is to open it up again with no funding, just,
What's the time element? I'm curious what the time element is down in Tenino.
I don't know the specifics. I understand.
Haven't
the
heard one way or the other?
We need to get an application.
They need to submit an
Oh,
application.
I mean, we haven't got anything yet.
No, and that's what I think the board needs to decide
Sure.
for how long. How
Okay.
long can the new round can be open for applications?
We will look at that, but we'd look at something close to 60 days like we do.
And that will be
initially.
closed, 60 days window.
I have a question about that, just a process question. So do we need to make any changes to resolutions? You said March 1st, everything had to be in, but who made that decision? We did?
The board.
You did.
So at our option, we can say, well, we're gonna extend it to July 30th or whatever. I mean, so it's
Yep.
our prerogative.
And our recommendation would be a 60-day round, opened as soon as possible.
I got no heart, I have no heart.
We want to be as consistent as we can with the round that's closing now, but just we'll open a second one.
So but we've covered the Powell Creek.
Correct.
I have one question. Didn't we do a salmon enhancement project up there on that bridge or culvert that's gonna, and this is actually gonna be beneficial?
That's right. Yeah, county's invested substantial funds in rebuilding the bridge over Elbow Creek to open it up.
Yeah.
Elbow Creek and Powell Creek to feed
Yeah.
the same system. And then join just right at this. just below
I
the-
guess I would like to make sure that I'm not looking for a pat on the back. I'm looking for, that we get credit as far as when we're moving forward with other issues, that because we may have got some, funding for that particular project. I don't know. We're putting in as much as we can. I can't keep track. But I like to have the funders know that, hey, not only did we do X, which was rebuild that culvert bridge, whatever it was, but now we've dedicated more money to habitat that goes along with this. So it can show that we're taking the initiative on salmon enhancement, you might say, which we've been doing before the court decision ever came out. So we've got a long history, and I like to capitalize on that history when we put in for other projects. So, yeah, Joe's got something there.
Perhaps we're pointing out that last winter before last, in the area of
Excuse me, Joe, I stepped
Can
out.
we- Can
Can you come
hear
up
him?
here?
Okay, he'll come over here. So it's the microphones, so it's,
Thanks. Just briefly, I wanted to say that winter before last, for the first time in 31 years, we saw coho salmon in Upper Powell Creek, which is because of the work that's been done on replacing that culvert in Elbow Creek for the
Yeah,
bridge, the county
right.
project, and then work we've also done on the Powell Creek culvert to put a bridge in there as well through the Salmon Enhancement Group. So
So does that make sense to staff, though, that when we're putting in, we gotta keep track of this stuff, that we're not only doing X, but we're doing Y and Z as well for the benefit, and I think that makes us more eligible to receive funding when we ask for funding in other areas. We've got a history of trying to do the right thing all the time. That's just a little joke between us here.
thank you. Okay, so with that, have decision points ready to go. It's 11:13. We are adjourned.